Pause, breathe, begin slowly. When we walk the path of self-mastery, we learn to observe not just the world, but the people within it, and among these people, some smile with warmth, while others smile with intention. The first sign is politeness that feels cold. They say the right words, nod in the right moments, but the energy, it never arrives, like drinking tea with no fragrance. There is no soul behind the gesture. The second sign, the absence of genuine support. You speak of a dream, a plan, a victory, and what meets you is silence, a distracted glance, or a dry "that's nice." When someone truly celebrates you, you feel it. When they don't, you feel that too. Third, they shrink your light when it starts to shine, not with shouts, but with whispers, a subtle jab, a careless word. They challenge your joy with skepticism, hiding contempt inside concern. That is not love, that is quiet sabotage. Fourth, they come only when the wind favors their sails. Where are they when your sky turns gray? Gone. But when the sun returns, they reappear, asking, taking, never offering. This is not connection, it is convenience. Fifth, and most important, they do not rejoice in your happiness. Watch their face when you are praised. Do their eyes soften or stiffen? Does their breath open or hold? Jealousy does not always shout. Sometimes it simply stares in silence. These signs, once seen, cannot be unseen, and yet do not answer hate with hate. Do not confront shadows with more darkness. Instead, walk forward with clarity. Withdraw your energy with grace. Protect your peace without violence, because those who secretly hate you are already burdened by their own war. Do not join them in the battlefield. Instead, continue the training. Sharpen your awareness, guard your spirit, and above all, remain unshaken. Certainly. Here's an 800-word expanded version of the point ***. The disguise of politeness. Not all smiles reflect kindness. Some are masks hiding resentment. ***, written in the reflective, disciplined, and mindful tone inspired by Shi Hengyi's style. Calm, deliberate, and inward, looking without the need. Aggressive conclusion or commentary. There is a kind of politeness that does not stem from kindness. It comes not from compassion, but from control. It is a performance rehearsed and smooth, like a blade hidden in silk. This politeness wears a smile, yes, but that smile is not for connection. It is for camouflage. Most people do not see it immediately. The world teaches us to equate manners with goodness. A gentle tone, a courteous nod, a compliment offered in just the right measure. These seem like clear signs of respect, but in truth they can be tools of distance, not closeness. Not all smiles are bridges. Some are walls painted to look like doors. You may find yourself around someone who never raises their voice, who never says an unkind word directly. They might even praise you in public. They might offer help, lend a hand, speak softly. But somehow your body remains tense around them. You do not know why. You cannot point to any specific offense, but you leave the interaction feeling smaller, dimmer, unsure. This is not your imagination. It is your intuition. A deeper part of you recognizes what the surface has been trained to ignore. The disguise of politeness is a clever one. It avoids blame. It escapes confrontation. It leaves no proof behind. Because what it withholds is subtle sincerity. In these interactions, the words are right, but the energy is wrong. You sense it in the way they ask about your success, with eyes that scan for weakness instead of offering joy. You hear it in their laughter when they joke about you, how it lingers just a little too long, how it fails to soften at the end. You feel it in their compliments that somehow point to your flaws. You're brave for wearing that. I admire how you don't care what people think. You always manage somehow. These words wear polite clothing, but they walk with different intentions. In ancient traditions, students were taught to observe, not just what people said, but how they said it. To feel tone, to sense timing, to study the pauses, the microaggressions, the body's stillness or stiffness. These are the languages that truth speaks when words betray it. In the same way that a martial artist can read an opponent's movements before the attack arrives, the aware person can sense the hidden emotion behind polite speech. This is not paranoia, it is presence. Why do some people wear politeness like armor? The answer often lies in their own unresolved wounds. Resentment, jealousy, insecurity, they are difficult emotions to admit, so instead of facing them, a person buries them. But what is buried is not gone. It simply grows roots in silence, and when that person is around someone who threatens their sense of control, perhaps through success, confidence, or authenticity, those roots begin to stir. The resentment does not explode, it seeps. It leaks into interactions as sarcasm, as indifference, as compliments laced with criticism. The person does not even always know they are doing it. Their politeness is not only a disguise for others, it is a disguise they wear for themselves. The cost of this hidden hostility is often carried by the one receiving it. You begin to doubt yourself. You question your reactions. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. They didn't mean anything by it. They're always nice to me. And so you stay. You engage, you allow their words into your space, but the body never lies. Your breath shortens, your shoulders tighten, your energy lowers. You feel unseen, misunderstood, misread. This is the body's wisdom speaking. It is telling you that something is off, even if your mind cannot name it. True politeness is not a mask, it is a mirror. It reflects sincerity, respect, and goodwill. It does not confuse, it does not diminish. It nourishes. You feel more at ease after speaking with someone who is genuinely kind, not less. You feel encouraged, not second-guessed. They do not need to flatter. Their presence is their honesty. Their words are aligned with their breath, with their eyes, with their actions. You do not have to decode their meaning. You simply feel it. But when you encounter the opposite, when you face someone who hides behind politeness, it is your responsibility to remain clear. Not to expose them, not to retaliate, but to listen inwardly, to protect your space, to learn the difference between being respected and being managed. In silence, much is revealed. The more still you become, the easier it is to sense this false politeness. It creates static in the air. It feels like a calm surface over deep, unsettled water. And when you feel it, do not ignore it. You do not need to accuse. You do not need to confront. You simply need to see. And once seen, choose how much of your spirit you wish to share in that space. Because energy is a currency more valuable than words. And not every smile is a door you need to walk through. When you begin to grow, when you take even one step toward change, improvement, or a deeper version of yourself, you quickly learn something about the people around you. Growth is not always met with applause. In fact, the loudest opposition is sometimes not a voice at all. It is silence, a kind of quiet that does not soothe but stings. It arrives when you share your progress and there is no response, no warmth, no curiosity, just stillness like water that no longer moves to meet you. This silence is not the peaceful kind. It is not the silence of deep presence or quiet admiration. It is the silence of withheld energy, of someone who once engaged with you but now seems distant, uninterested, disconnected. You notice it when you mention your goals and they change the subject, when you achieve something meaningful and they offer a nod, but no light in their eyes, when you need encouragement and all you receive is neutrality so heavy it begins to feel like resistance. Some people do not need to criticize you in order to discourage you. They simply remove their energy from your journey. Where there once may have been shared excitement, feedback, or emotional support, there is now vacancy. A blank wall where you once found reflection, and at first you may not notice it, because withholding is subtle. It is not a door slammed shut, it is a door that was quietly left ajar, and then one day gently pulled closed without a sound. You may wonder if it's your imagination. You replay conversations, searching for evidence. Maybe they're just busy. You tell yourself, maybe they didn't hear me, but you felt it, you always do. Because we are attuned as human beings not just to what people say, but how present they are when they say it. Energy cannot lie. It is either with you or it is not. When someone offers no genuine encouragement in your growth, they are revealing more about themselves than they are about you. Growth in one person often awakens discomfort in another, not because your progress harms them, but because it confronts something within them that is unresolved. It may highlight their own stagnation or expose their unfulfilled potential. And instead of facing that inner dissonance, they withdraw, not physically but energetically. They stop celebrating you because your light reveals the shadows they have been avoiding. There is a difference between absence and withholding. Absence is sometimes unintentional, circumstantial, and temporary, but withholding is a decision. It is a form of passive resistance, a quiet message that says, I do not want to see you rise too far above me. It is not always malicious. Sometimes it is unconscious, but whether it's rooted in envy, insecurity, or fear, the impact is the same. Your spirit feels alone where it once felt seen. You may find yourself working harder to prove your progress, hoping for some recognition. You may over-explain or overshare, trying to reignite their support, but genuine support does not require prompting. It flows naturally from those who care, not about your comfort, but about your expansion. They may not always understand your path, but they walk beside you simply because it matters to you. There is a quiet pain in realizing someone you valued cannot meet you in your growth. But that realization is not a punishment. It is clarity, and clarity is a form of inner strength. You begin to see who was attached to your stillness and who honors your movement. You begin to feel the difference between being tolerated and being encouraged. One makes you shrink, the other makes you breathe. Withholding energy can also disguise itself in rational language. They may say, I just don't want you to get disappointed, or I'm playing devil's advocate. But true encouragement does not require delusion. It is not blind optimism. It is the courage to say, I see what you are reaching for, and I believe in your ability to reach it, even if you fail. Encouragement is a gift of presence. It says, I see you. I honor your effort. I stand with you, even if I don't fully understand the road ahead. When this energy is withheld, your journey becomes heavier, not impossible, but heavier, because we draw strength not only from within, but also from the ecosystems around us. When those ecosystems become dry, we must learn to water ourselves, to recognize that the silence from others does not reflect the value of our path. It reflects the limits of their perception. The ones who withhold are not always enemies. But they are not allies either. They are mirrors showing you where your validation must no longer be outsourced. And so you move forward, quieter perhaps, but more rooted. You learn to hold your own light. You learn to find joy in your progress, even when no one claps. And in that space of inner resolve, you become unshakable. Because when energy is withheld from you, the lesson is not loss, it is sovereignty. There are forms of harm that leave no visible bruise, no raised voice, no insult etched into the air. They arrive quietly, like a whisper in a crowded room, easy to miss but impossible to ignore once you notice. Subtle undermining is one such form. It doesn't strike loudly. It erodes, a slow drip on stone, a grain of doubt placed over and over, until your own confidence begins to feel unfamiliar. The person doing it may never raise suspicion. They may appear calm, supportive, even friendly, but their presence in your life begins to carry a strange weight, one that grows heavier the more you try to shine. You speak with hope about something you're building, something you've worked hard to understand, something that matters to you. You look up, expecting a spark of interest, maybe pride, but what meets you is a pause, a half-smile, followed by a phrase that feels like a pin to your balloon. That's one way to do it, they say, or you always go for the complicated solution. Sometimes it's a joke. Well, let's hope it actually works this time. The words seem light, even harmless, but the message underneath is heavier than it appears. Subtle undermining thrives in ambiguity. It hides behind tone, behind timing, behind layers of plausible deniability. If you point it out, they'll say you're imagining things. I was just joking. You take things too seriously. I'm just being honest. But the truth is not in the words alone, it's in the pattern. One moment, one comment, one interruption could be meaningless. But when those moments string together over time, a picture begins to form. A pattern of dismissal, a habit of chipping away at your certainty, a steady questioning of your competence, your ideas, your instincts. You may find your energy shifting in their presence. You begin explaining more than necessary, over-clarifying, anticipating doubt before it's spoken. You shrink your ideas before they can. You laugh along with their jokes even when they sting, because confrontation feels exhausting and silence feels safer. And all the while you wonder, am I being too sensitive? Did I misread that? But deep down something knows. The same way a plant knows when the sun no longer reaches its leaves. Sometimes the person who undermines you wears the mask of a mentor or a friend. They might even claim to be protecting you from failure or embarrassment. But protection, when sincere, uplifts. It strengthens. It offers honest feedback without dismantling your spirit. Subtle undermining does the opposite. It presents itself as concern, but it poisons motivation. It arrives as feedback, but it questions your worth. It disguises itself as advice, but it keeps you small. These people may not be aware of the damage they cause. Sometimes their behavior is rooted in insecurity. Your growth, your ideas, your success, these things mirror their own lack of movement, and so they chip away not to destroy you, but to ease themselves. If you remain unsure, they don't have to face their own stillness. If you doubt yourself, they can avoid their own reflection. But whether conscious or not, the impact remains. The slow erosion of trust, not just trust in them, but in yourself. You start second, guessing your voice in rooms where you once spoke freely. You hesitate before sharing new ideas. You downplay your own accomplishments before anyone else has the chance to. And what's most dangerous is that the change feels internal, like it came from you. That is the quiet power of undermining. It turns external resistance into internal self-doubt. To see this clearly, you must become still. Observation is your strength. Listen not just to what is said, but how it is said. Pay attention to how you feel after conversations. Are you energized or depleted? Grounded or shaken? Inspired or uncertain? The body speaks with clarity, the mind often resists. When you leave someone's presence consistently feeling smaller than you arrived, that is not a relationship, it is erosion. You do not need permission to protect your space. You do not need evidence to trust your instincts. The person who continually undermines you may never admit it, may never see it. That is not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is to your own clarity, your own voice, your own becoming. Some people respond to your growth with support. Others respond with subtle sabotage. The difference is not always loud, but it is always real. When you reclaim awareness, the power begins to return to you. You speak your ideas without waiting for approval. You share your wins without shrinking them. You start to trust your inner compass more than the quiet resistance of others. And slowly, the words that once chipped away at your certainty lose their weight, because you no longer place your sense of worth in the hands of someone who benefits from your doubt. Subtle undermining is not about loud conflict. It is about quiet control, but your awareness is the antidote, and once you begin to see, you no longer ask for understanding. You simply walk forward not because they finally believe in you, but because you do. There is a kind of presence that is not rooted in care, but in convenience. A presence that arrives not in your silence, but in your spotlight. These are the people who orbit your life not out of loyalty, but out of opportunity. They are quick to show up when there is something to gain, something to ask for, something they can take. But when the ground beneath your feet begins to shake, when your voice quiets, when the days are darker and the way forward uncertain, they vanish, not loudly, not with explanation, but subtly, a slow fading, as if your pain made you invisible. Conditional presence is not always obvious at first. It can look like support. It can even feel like friendship. They may laugh with you, celebrate with you, send messages when they see your name mentioned, or when your success offers a chance to be close to something that shines. But there is a pattern beneath the surface. They appear when the season is bright and disappear when the sky turns gray. Their connection to you is transactional, not relational. They do not stand beside you when you have nothing to give. They do not ask, "How are you?" when they already sense the answer is heavy. They are not interested in the version of you that struggles. When someone is only present in your moments of strength, you begin to question what will remain when that strength fades, because every life has its seasons. There are times of abundance, yes, but also times of emptiness, confusion, grief. These are the moments that reveal the true nature of presence. Not the presence that posts and praises and joins the party, but the quiet, enduring presence that shows up when you fall, without needing to be asked, without needing you to be impressive. Conditional presence can be difficult to confront because it wears the appearance of friendship, and when it's gone, it doesn't make a sound, it just stops showing up. The calls slow down, the check-ins disappear. Your good news is met with selective interest, your struggles are ignored or avoided, and when you really need someone, not for advice, not for solutions, but simply for company, they are unreachable, busy, distracted, silent. The danger of this kind of relationship is not just the absence of support, it is the illusion that support exists. You begin to invest in people who do not invest in you. You begin to pour energy into keeping connections alive that only respond to your usefulness. And slowly, without even realizing, you begin to equate your worth with your performance. You start believing that to be seen, you must be needed, that your struggle must be hidden, your pain carried alone, your vulnerability edited before being shared. You learn to become valuable instead of becoming authentic. But there is a deep loneliness that lives inside that way of being. Because no matter how many people surround you, if they are only there for what you offer, your skills, your resources, your visibility, your achievements, you are still alone, not because you are unloved, but because you are unknown. Conditional presence does not make space for the full truth of who you are. It only stays long enough to take what is easy and leaves when what's needed is effort. You might begin to test the waters. You share a little struggle, you open up slightly, hoping someone will notice, but the reaction is muted, awkward. They change the subject, or offer surface-level advice and disappear again, not because they are cruel, but because they are not rooted. They are connected to the version of you that benefits them, not the version that bleeds, and yet there is nothing dramatic about their leaving. They do not announce their absence. They simply step back. They simply stop showing up when your life no longer offers something they want, and it is in this slow departure that you learn. Consistency is the measure of real presence, not loud praise, not big gestures, but quiet endurance, the willingness to stay when staying is inconvenient, the desire to check in when there's nothing to gain, the humility to witness your weakness without pulling away. You don't need many of these people. Just a few, or even one, someone whose presence is unconditional, someone who stays when you're not winning, when you're not needed, when you're simply human. These people are rare, but they exist, and often they don't speak the loudest. They don't appear in every room, but they are there, quiet, steady, offering nothing but themselves. The presence of the conditional leaves behind an ache, but also a lesson, a sharpening of awareness. a deepening of discernment. You begin to observe more carefully. You begin to see who reaches out without a reason, who notices your silence without you having to explain, who asks how you are, not because they want something, but because they care. And from that awareness, you begin to reclaim your energy. You no longer chase those who only see your surface. You no longer entertain connections that vanish when you are no longer useful. You stop measuring your worth by how much you give. You stop apologizing for your lows. You begin to honor your own presence by choosing, finally, to value those who do the same. There is a certain type of silence that follows your good news, not the kind that waits in awe, not the kind that holds reverence, but the kind that lingers too long, cold and heavy. You feel it in their smile, stretched a little too tight. You see it in their eyes, darting away from yours just before they speak, and when they finally say something, it's restrained, filtered, diluted. That's great for you, they offer, as if your joy is a language they don't speak. In that moment, you realize that not everyone claps when you rise. Some shift in their seats, uneasy, like your success disrupted something within them. Discomfort in your joy doesn't always show up in opposition. It doesn't scream, it doesn't argue, it quietly recoils. It changes the energy of the room without changing the words being said. You start to notice the change in tone when you speak about your dreams, how the conversation gets redirected, how your victories are met with lukewarm responses, how your elevation doesn't ignite celebration, but a subtle withdrawal. You feel the tension, and it confuses you because you expected support. You expected shared excitement. After all, these are the people closest to you. But instead of applause, you are met with stillness that tastes like resentment. Sometimes they cannot even explain their reaction. It is not always rooted in malice. Often it's something older, something deeper. Your growth reflects something they've postponed. Your courage to step forward shines a light on their hesitation. Your joy feels like a mirror, showing them the places they have yet to step into fully. And so, instead of leaning in, they lean away, not because they don't love you, but because your success threatens the story they tell themselves about who they are and what they can become. There are moments when this is subtle. You share that you received an opportunity, and they quickly mention someone else who got something better. You say you're excited about a new relationship, and they bring up how most people change once they're in love. You talk about feeling more at peace lately, and they respond with cynicism masked as realism. It's not outright sabotage. It's doubt dressed in casual language, a soft deflation, as if they're letting the air out of your joy one breath at a time. Discomfort in your joy can come from those who once encouraged you before your growth surpassed their comfort zone. They were there when you struggled, when you doubted, when you needed reassurance. But now that you stand more fully in your power, something shifts. They can no longer relate to this version of you. The dynamic has changed, and rather than adapt, they retreat. You sense the difference, not because they say less, but because they feel further away. You start to dim your light ever so slightly, not because you're ashamed, but because you don't want to make anyone else uncomfortable. You become cautious with your excitement, editing your wins, softening your joy so it doesn't sound like bragging. You try to protect the relationship by shrinking the expression of your happiness, but joy that is hidden becomes joy that is hollow. You deserve to stand fully in the beauty of what you've built, what you've overcome, what you're becoming. There are people who will never be able to celebrate you because they have not yet learned to celebrate themselves. And while that is not a crime, it is not your responsibility to carry. Their discomfort is not your burden. Your growth is not a betrayal. Your joy is not arrogance. It is a reflection of effort, of healing, of transformation, and it deserves space. It deserves expression. It deserves people around you who meet it with light in their eyes, not shadows on their faces. When someone cannot meet you in your joy, it doesn't mean they are bad. It means they are not ready, and readiness is not something you can give to another person. It is something they must choose for themselves. Some will choose to grow with you. Some will choose to stay where they are. Your only task is to keep walking, keep growing, keep shining, not to provoke, but to live honestly, fully, without apology. Joy has a frequency. It resonates, it expands, but it also reveals. It reveals who feels empowered by your light and who feels eclipsed. It reveals who walks beside you as a mirror and who follows behind as a shadow. It shows you where love is rooted and where it was merely conditional. You begin to notice those who are truly with you do not flinch at your joy. They amplify it, they echo your laughter, they hold your wins as if they were their own. They do not compare, they do not compete, they celebrate. Not because they need something from you, but because they love seeing you free. Your joy then becomes a compass, not just pointing toward your passions, but toward your people. The ones who stay when you rise, the ones who clap even when they are struggling, the ones who see your light and smile, not because it benefits them, but because they know what it took for you to shine. There is a form of speech that draws laughter, yet leaves a mark. It's not loud, it's not vulgar, but it leaves you questioning yourself, your worth, your place in the room. These are the comments that arrive disguised as jokes. On the surface, they seem harmless, playful, even clever, but underneath the laughter is a blade. A comment about your intelligence, your appearance, your accent, your habits, dressed in sarcasm, served with a smile. You're expected to laugh along. You're told, don't take it so seriously, but something inside you recoils, something inside you knows that wasn't a joke, that was a warning, a judgment, a small act of disrespect that asked for your silence in return. Microaggressions disguised as humor are not accidents. They are subtle, intentional acts of minimizing, and they thrive in environments where emotional awareness is low and social masks are common. The person who delivers them rarely sees themselves as aggressive. In fact, they may believe they're being witty, that they're keeping things light. But there is nothing light about being reduced to a stereotype or a flaw, especially in front of others. There is nothing funny about the slow erosion of respect. You begin to notice the pattern. These comments are not shared with everyone. They're aimed at you repeatedly in moments where you feel exposed or proud. When you speak up in a meeting and someone says, "Wow, who gave you coffee today?" When you dress with care and someone mutters, "Trying hard, aren't we?" When you share a personal story and here comes the drama. These comments don't come from a place of kindness. They come from discomfort. With your confidence, with your authenticity, with your presence, and instead of confronting that discomfort in themselves, they deflect it onto you. Through sarcasm, jokes, and dismissive humor, the impact is cumulative. One remark may feel like nothing, but over time the repetition wears you down. You start to anticipate it. You hesitate before speaking. You second guess how you carry yourself. You begin to self-edit, not for clarity, but for safety. You tell yourself it's not worth the reaction, the ridicule, the laugh at your expense, and slowly, without noticing, you make yourself smaller. Not because you want to, but because the environment teaches you that your full presence is unwelcome. The problem with these jokes is not just their content, it's their design. They are crafted to disarm you. If you confront them, you're told you're too sensitive. If you remain silent, they continue. It's a trap. One that relies on your need to belong, your desire not to disrupt, your instinct to keep peace. But peace built on disrespect is not peace. It is quiet suffering. You begin to realize that humor is not neutral. It carries weight, it reveals values, it exposes insecurities. The person who constantly makes others the target of their jokes is not being playful. They are asserting control. They are testing boundaries. And they are relying on social discomfort to keep others from calling it out. But the truth is, anyone who consistently makes you the punchline is not your ally. They may smile with you. They may even claim to care about you. But their actions speak a different truth. They do not respect you fully, and they do not believe you will challenge them. These jokes often go unchecked, not because they are invisible, but because they are excuse. That's just how they are. They don't mean anything by it. But meaning is not the only measure of harm. Repetition is, tone is, impact is. And when someone repeatedly chooses humor that targets your identity, your effort, your place in the room, they are not being playful. They are being aggressive through subtle means. You are allowed to draw a line, even if the room laughs. Even if the person insists they were joking, you are allowed to say, "That's not funny to me." You are allowed to pause, to let the silence settle, to make visible what was meant to be hidden. Because discomfort is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is necessary, especially when it exposes a pattern of disrespect that has gone unchallenged for too long. There is a form of strength that does not raise its voice, but simply refuses to smile when something isn't right. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to make them understand. You only need to stand in your truth with clarity. Those who truly respect you will adjust. Those who don't were never interested in doing so to begin with. Humor, at its best, brings people closer. It builds bridges, it relieves tension, it creates shared joy. But when it is used to isolate, to mock, to disguise discomfort or envy, it becomes a weapon. And you are not here to be anyone's target. Not in jest, not in sarcasm, not in silence, you begin to understand that protecting your dignity is not about being rigid or humorless. It's about knowing the difference between laughter that lifts you and laughter that cuts you. You learn to surround yourself with people who make you feel seen, not reduced, and when jokes are thrown your way that mask aggression, you no longer absorb them. You simply recognize them for what they are, small acts from small minds. And you keep walking, taller, clearer, unshaken. There is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical effort, but from emotional defense. It creeps in slowly, subtly, every time you are around someone whose energy demands your caution. You do not feel relaxed in their company. You do not feel seen or safe. Instead, you carry a quiet tension in your shoulders, a persistent awareness in your gut. You find yourself rehearsing your words before you speak, not because you fear being misunderstood, but because you fear being judged. This is what it feels like to exist without emotional safety. Emotional safety is not a luxury. It is the ground on which real connection stands. When it is missing, something essential is absent. You may still speak, but you do not share. You may still smile, but you do not open. You may still show up, but never fully. There is always a part of you that remains hidden, not out of secrecy, but out of protection, because the person before you does not make it safe to be vulnerable, not because they hurt you in obvious ways, but because they leave you feeling unheard, unseen, or slowly erased. You start to notice the signs. After spending time with them, you feel drained, not inspired, not nourished, but emptied. You carry a kind of weariness that has no name. Conversations feel more like performance than dialogue. You laugh at the right moments. You nod when expected, but none of it feels real. It feels like acting, and the script is always someone else's. You are careful with your joy, your grief, your doubts, because something about their presence teaches you not to trust it. When you try to share something personal, it's met with dismissal, or worse, silence. When you express hurt, they deflect it. When you celebrate, they minimize it. It's not always malicious, but it's consistent. You come forward with emotion, and they respond with avoidance or criticism. And slowly you learn to hold everything in, not because you want to, but because it feels safer than being misunderstood again. You may tell yourself that you're imagining it, that perhaps you're too sensitive, but safety is not a thought, it is a feeling, and your body never lies. The tightness in your chest, the hesitation in your words, the second guessing of your feelings, these are signals that something is off, that you are not being met with openness, that the space between you is not soft but sharp, and sharpness, when sustained, leads to wounds. In the absence of emotional safety, anxiety grows. You overanalyze messages, you replay conversations, you prepare for reactions that haven't happened yet. It becomes less about being present and more about anticipating harm, and this anticipation becomes exhausting. You spend more time managing their energy than protecting your own. You give them the benefit of the doubt repeatedly while denying yourself the benefit of your own instincts. There is a loneliness that exists even in the company of others. It is the loneliness of not being able to show up fully, of censoring your truth, of pretending to be okay. This kind of loneliness is not loud, but it is heavy, and when you are around someone who triggers it often, you begin to associate their presence with anxiety. You start to dread the conversations, the calls, the meetings, not because they are overtly harmful, but because they do not make space for who you really are. Trust is not built through grand gestures. It is built in the moments when someone listens with care, when they do not weaponize your emotions, when they hold your experiences without judgment, when they stay soft when you are fragile. Without these moments, there can be no safety. And without safety, there can be no true connection. You deserve to feel at ease with the people in your life. You deserve to speak without fear of being diminished. You deserve to be celebrated in your joy, supported in your pain, and respected in your silence. But if someone makes you feel like your emotions are inconvenient, your boundaries are too much, or your presence is conditional, then what you have is not connection. It is survival, and survival is not the same as love. There will always be people who expect you to shrink to make space for their comfort, who take your vulnerability as weakness, who only respond to the version of you that is easy to handle. But you do not need to carry these dynamics as your responsibility. It is not your job to teach someone how to care. It is not your role to translate your needs into something palatable for them. You are allowed to ask, *, does this feel safe? *, and if the answer is no, you are allowed to leave. Emotional safety is not about perfection. It is about intention. It is about knowing that when you bring your truth forward, it will not be used against you. It is about feeling held, not because someone agrees with everything you say, but because they respect the courage it takes to say it. You should not have to armor up just to have a conversation. You should not feel like you're walking on glass when you're with someone who claims to care. The absence of emotional safety is often invisible to others. But you feel it every time, and the moment you stop ignoring that feeling, everything changes. You start seeking environments where you can breathe, speak, rest, and simply be. Not out of defiance, but out of self-respect. Because peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of safety, and you deserve nothing less. There is a knowing that does not come through logic, through evidence, or through words. It arrives quietly, deeply, and without explanation. It does not speak in sentences. It speaks in sensations, in the tightness of your chest, the heaviness in your limbs, the flutter of unease in your stomach. It is the unspoken truth, the one your body registers long before your mind allows you to name it. And though it whispers, it is not uncertain. It is precise, persistent, and patient. It waits for you to stop rationalizing. It waits for you to stop making excuses. It waits for you to finally listen. There is a moment when you're with someone and something feels off. They haven't said anything cruel. They haven't done anything overt. But their energy brushes against you in a way that leaves a trace. It's subtle. So subtle you question yourself. You tell yourself it's just a mood, a bad day, that you're overthinking, but your body knows. Your body notices the way your breath shortens when they enter the room. The way you unconsciously straighten your posture, try harder, speak softer. Your body feels the disconnection before your mind dares to admit it. And when you start sensing this again and again, it's no longer an isolated moment, it's a pattern. A pattern that you've been trained to overlook, especially if the person in question claims to love or care for you. Society teaches you to prioritize evidence over intuition, to wait for clarity, to wait for something real. But what could be more real than the way your heart reacts in their presence? What could be more real than the constant drain of managing how you are perceived by someone who never really sees you? You begin to sense it in the pauses, those gaps between what they say and what they actually mean. In the compliments that carry a shadow, in the laughter that never quite reaches their eyes, in the way they show up for others, yet grow cold when it's your turn. They may never voice the distance, but the distance is there. You feel it when you celebrate something important, and their response is delayed or lukewarm. You feel it when you're vulnerable, and they offer silence instead of support. It is not always what is said that reveals the truth. It is what is withheld. Your body begins to store the story. You lose sleep. You feel restless around them. You dread certain conversations. You sense the need to explain yourself before you even open your mouth. That tension builds, and the pressure to ignore it becomes unbearable. The longer you silence your instincts, the more disconnected you become, not just from them, but from yourself. Your intuition doesn't go away. It simply grows louder in ways that look like anxiety, fatigue, sadness, or irritability. And even then, the mind tries to override it. It comes in with logic, with memories, with justifications. They've done so much for me. They're just going through something. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But sensitivity is not weakness. It is intelligence. It is your system's way of telling you what the mind cannot yet accept, that something fundamental is misaligned, that what you feel in their presence is not safety, that your heart cannot fully open around them, that there is an unspoken truth standing between what is and what should be. This truth is not always about betrayal or deception. Sometimes it's about misalignment. You and another person simply exist on different frequencies now. But because there is history, because there was once connection, you struggle to let go. You hold on to the memory instead of the present reality, but the body does not live in memory. It responds only to now. And in the now, it is telling you something is missing, something is off, something is not love, no matter how much the words pretend otherwise. This knowing is ancient. It comes from the part of you that remembers what it means to be safe, to be seen, to be held. And it refuses to settle for less, even if your logic begs it to, even if your loyalty resists, even if your fear pleads with you to stay. The body has no use for denial. It speaks through symptoms, through instinct, through emotion, and it does not require permission to tell the truth. When you finally allow yourself to sit with this knowing, when you stop silencing it with busyness or burying it under the weight of reason, clarity emerges. Not as an answer, but as a feeling, a shift, a recognition. You may not have the perfect words to explain it, but you no longer need them, because what you know now is undeniable. The connection, whatever it once was, is not what it claims to be. And your body, your truest compass, has been signaling this from the beginning. You begin to move differently. You stop explaining yourself so much. You start protecting your energy more carefully. You learn to listen not just to what others say, but to what your spirit feels in their presence. And from that listening, you begin to make different choices, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. Because when the unspoken truth finally becomes something you honor, everything begins to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a fog lifting, like a breath returning, like yourself, coming home. When the masks fall silent and the distractions fade, what remains is your quiet knowing. How you feel in someone's presence, what they reveal in your growth, how they respond to your joy, your wounds, your voice. Hatred doesn't always arrive with violence or cruelty. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, behind laughter, behind duty, but your spirit feels it, the chill beneath their smile, the silence when you needed words. the unease when you dared to shine. These are not misunderstandings, they are signs. And while your mind may seek evidence, your body always speaks first. You may second, guess, delay, rationalize, but eventually the truth stands undeniable. Some people do not celebrate your existence. They may need you, use you, tolerate you, but they do not honor you, and that knowing is not meant to make you bitter. It is meant to make you free, because this speech was never about others. It was always about you. Your awareness, your boundaries, your return to self-respect. Not everyone will love you, but you are not here to be loved by all. You are here to walk in truth, surrounded by those who do not flinch at your light. So when the signs come, subtle, soft, or loud, listen, and when the truth arrives, honor it, even if it means walking away, especially if it means coming back to yourself.